Welcome to the Practice Development Workshop. It's so nice to see you all again. Okay, let's make a start now. I'm sure you're not unfamiliar with PEDAL by now, which is Play in Education, Development and Learning. So Homestart have been working with PEDAL for some time on a few different pieces of work. So if you have not done so, we have a course on the Learning Center called Healthy Happy Home. In the course, there is a module around play and neurodiversity, and that was produced in collaboration with PEDAL. I've done it myself, and I found it really interesting and relevant to Homestart. And we've also received positive comments, feedback from colleagues as well. So I'll recommend it when you have a chance. Please do go and have a look if you haven't done so. Today, we have Christine O'Farrelly with us. She is a research professor at PEDAL. She will explore how we could support the relationship between the caregiver and the child, especially during the first years of life. And she will talk about two projects. One is Healthy Start, Happy Start, and the other one is Playtime with Books. We also know that you really value the time and space to talk to each other, to share ideas and practice. So during the session, there will be breakout time to do so. We have also set aside some time for Q&A at the end. You could leave your questions in the chat column and we will pick them up later on. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to you, Christine, if that's okay.
Thank you so much, Vicky, for that lovely introduction and also for this lovely invitation to spend some time with you all this morning. And I'm really interested in hearing about your practice, so hopefully we'll have some good time for discussion. As Vicky said, I'm from the PEDAL Centre at the University of Cambridge. We do lots of research and work there, but I suppose our goal is really to use research and also knowledge mobilisation to improve childhoods and children's life chances. I'm a research professor there and I work really closely with Paul Ramchandani. And our work is really trying to widen access to evidence-informed practice to improve children's outcomes in the early years. And I'm going to talk to you about those two projects that Vicky mentioned. What's common to both of those is really thinking about how we can harness the power of the caregiver-baby or caregiver-child relationship and how we can support that as well through our practice and work. So I'm going to jump straight in with looking at a video together. So what I was hoping we could do is I'll let you choose which perspective to take, and there isn't a right answer to this. So choose whether you want to take the child's perspective or mom's perspective. Sometimes if we have enough time, we do both. So we switch and everybody has a go at taking one or the other, but pick one. Pick child or mum, and we're going to have a look at, this is a bit of an artificial scenario that we use in one of our research studies, where we bring along, the researcher brings along a bag of toys, gives it to the caregiver and says, lay out these toys, but for the first minute, the little one isn't allowed to touch anything. And then after a minute, they're allowed to touch the least attractive toy, which we've decided as the adults is the rattle in this case. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to elicit some of those more challenging moments that come up all the time, every day, where the caregiver might not be able to allow the child to touch something. Maybe it's a hot cup of tea or something like that, or something's just not possible. And then our program uses these clips to explore them with the parent, and I'll tell you a little bit more about one of our programs later on. So choose a perspective, and we're going to have a look at this clip together for a few moments and see what we might be doing. These will not be new ideas to you, but they're just two ideas to keep in mind as we move through the session. So one is the importance of caregiving relationships. That's really central to the work that we do at PEDAL on our studies. And we use an attachment perspective, so the importance of that emotional bond between babies and and young children and their key caregivers, and how that relationship, when particularly when it's secure, so when children learn through those repeated interactions that the caregiver is emotionally and physically available, how that can help them to regulate those more challenging and difficult emotions in times of stress or when things are difficult. Also then to have the confidence to explore the environment when they're feeling more regulated, and how those relationships really set the children up well for learning and taking advantage of that, and also gives them that template that they take with them out into the world about what they might expect from other relationships, and where there's a good caregiving relationship that can really support them and kind of set them on a strong path for making peer relationships and relationships with other adults like teachers and other people outside of the kind of family context. And one of the things that we think about in our research is how those relationships can be supported where the caregiver is able to be sensitive. And what we mean by this is being able to kind of tune into what's going on for the little one, being curious about what that might be in terms of what they're thinking, feeling, needing, and being able to respond to that. So respond to the child's needs in a timely way. So that's one idea to keep in mind. The other idea to keep in mind is just that context matters. So this is all happening in that really kind of close relationship, but obviously families exist in wider systems that influence the relationship in terms of the wider home environment, what's going on in the neighborhood, what's going on in their community, and also the kind of different policies and different kind of societal expectations that percolate down through to the family as well. So what is the situation in terms of job security, or in terms of availability of work, or the demands of that, and how that plays out then in terms of how available the caregiver might be able to be. Are the family living in poverty? What are the other circumstances going on? So although we focus on the caregiver-child relationship in our work in Petal, we really see it as being important that sits within wider systems that look to reduce pressures on families. So there are two ideas to keep in mind: the importance of the caregiver relationship, and then the importance of kind of everything else that's going on as well in terms of the wider context. I wanted to touch on milestones for children's early development around their kind of emotional development. These will be really familiar to most of you, but really just kind of grounding it in what's going on for the child. So in that kind of first 12 months, we're seeing that expression of those basic emotions, and how that's quickly giving way to kind of a richer emotional landscape for the child. They're learning over time in that first year their capacity to self-soothe. So they're learning how to do that, but they also really depend on their caregivers to help them co-regulate their emotions. So this is something that they learn how to do through co-regulation. They're increasingly able to kind of coordinate their emotional expression for social engagement. So we see that through social smiles, basically that idea that babies are born to a large extent and set up for social interaction, and how they elicit that through being ready for conversation, even though they might not be talking yet, of course, but how they do that through expression, smiling, engaging the caregiver in different ways. And they're also able to increasingly understand what's going on emotionally for other people. And we see this with little ones when something will happen and they'll look to their caregiver. We call this in psychology social referencing, but all that's going on is they're kind of saying, hey, mom, dad, or granny, or whoever the caregiver is, how should I interpret this? And so it might be a loud noise, it might be something that kind of startles them, and they'll look to the caregiver for an emotional cue as whether that's something to be worried about, which just indicates how important what's going on for the caregiver is then in terms of how that influences what goes on for the little one. So then into toddlerhood and the preschool period, we're starting to see the emergence of kind of more complex emotions like pride, but also maybe embarrassment or feeling guilty. You know, we see this when we support little ones to maybe navigate conflicts with their peers. And when we can orientate them to like, oh, what was that like for Sammy, maybe if you know if you snatch the toy from them, and you can see how that might show up in terms of them understanding that actually and maybe feeling bad about what's happened. Um, they start to become increasingly psychologically minded so that they're able to understand what might be happening for others. Um, an interesting one is that they start to become more autonomous. So often you see quite a kind of a happy baby starting to get really frustrated. And that's because they understand that they have autonomy and that they can have their way. It's not all what the caregiver decides. And that can lead to feelings of frustration when it's not possible for them to wear their wellies to bed or something like that. Um, they start to be able to increasingly use language to regulate their emotions. And I think someone commented on that in the clip that even when the little one did really well to say what was going on, and you could see, I was really impressed by that actually, by how well he did. And that you did see that kind of correspond with a moment of calmness or relative calm. So it was helping him regulate, saying what was going on for him. And we also see in this period that children become more pro-social, so they are able to, and because they are more psychologically minded, they're able to engage more with being pro-social or helpful or empathetic with others. Um, and one of the things that we're interested in Petal is that we often see that they start to be able to play with emotions in their play. So to try on feeling brave or feeling scared, or all sorts of different emotions in that kind of safe, low risk, low stakes context of play. So that's a lot that's going on in a relatively short period of time in terms of this development and changes in little ones' emotional skills, and just the complexity of the emotional landscape that's going on for them. And so we're interested in the role of caregivers in all of this and how they support children's emotional development. And you will know this from your work. It shows up in a whole host of different ways. We're particularly interested in what we call sensitive responding. And I mentioned that before, and how this gives the child a sense of, through those repeated responsive interactions, they learn that the caregiver is this reliable presence. And that gives them that sense of security and safety in the world. So I have a need, it's being met. I know that my caregiver is mostly available. Caregivers aren't sensitive all of the time, nor would we want them to be. But through those kind of mostly reliable and predictable patterns, that gives children that sense of emotional well-being and security. And that can also really help to buffer stress. So if they know a caregiver is mostly reliable, if they're having maybe it's a vaccination, maybe it's starting in nursery, all of those things, having those kind of sensitive caregivers really helps them cope with that stress. And we see that in little ones' physiology, where we measure their cortisol levels, having even if it's a new caregiver, like in a nursery context, if they can be sensitive and responsive, that actually buffers that cortisol response. Caregivers also help children by modeling how they manage their emotions, and that helps children to understand how you can regulate more challenging emotions like frustration or anger or those sorts of things, because they can see it in their caregivers. Caregivers also one of the kind of really powerful things that they can do is help by labeling and discussing emotions. So I can see that you're frustrated, or I can see that you're angry. That whatever the kind of context might be that Sammy wasn't able to share his train set with you, or whatever the context is. Actually, for little ones who might just have this kind of overwhelming big emotional response, knowing what that emotion is, being able to connect it with what's going on in their body, going on in their minds, is really powerful and really helpful, and helps them kind of work through it. Caregivers also can really help by providing playful context, because this gives little ones a practice ground for trying on those different emotions. Also, it gives those enjoyable moments that help with that bond and help with that relationship. So it's a real context for connection. And we'll see that when we come on to talk about both studies really, but especially in the Playtime of Books, how play can be that context for connection. Caregivers can also take more of a kind of direct role, more of a coaching role as well, giving children specific techniques to manage emotions, maybe helping them connect with what's going on with their body, connect with their breath, or different things that they might do to help little ones understand kind of in a kind of coaching moment. And then also we see that caregivers feed into, they don't always have control over this, but the emotional climate of the home as well, in terms of how they're regulating their own emotions, how they might be getting on with others in the home environment, and all of this kind of affects the emotional demands of the child. But obviously it's important to recognize that there might be limits in terms of what's in the caregiver's control, depending on what's going on in the wider home context. So that's a lot of information, and a lot of this will be really familiar to you, but just gives us a grounding kind of moving into the session. And I wanted to, this is just an illustration of co-regulation happening, where you can see that cylinder getting larger over time, which is that center cylinder is the child's or the baby's own self-regulation, and how over time caregivers at the beginning might have to do a lot of co-regulation and be doing a lot of that regulating the emotions for the little one. And then over time, through that process, babies and children get better at doing that self-regulation for themselves, but it's very much a connected process. So they very much are dependent on the caregiver to support that kind of development of self-regulation. So let's have a look at some of this in action. Some of you might be familiar with Dan Worry if you're on Twitter or other kind of social platforms. I find Dan's clips so helpful, because it's nice to see slides with text in them. It's even better to see all of this happening in action, and you'll see it in your work. So here we're going to see one of those things that we saw in those slides about the kind of things that caregivers can do. So again, pop in the text if you can see maybe what you're noticing in the chat about what this is like for baby, and what the caregiver is doing to support baby with this moment of emotional challenge and regulation. So if you've noticed anything about what that was like for baby, pop it in the chat, or anything that that mom did there to help little one in that kind of demanding moment. Anything in the chat, Vicky?
Yes, a few colleagues are saying skin to skin contact, the physical contact from mom, and sort of give out some warmth to the baby as well. It's a calm presence, helping to regulate breathing via her own breathing. Physical contact, very soothing, giving full attention to the baby. So it's
Yeah.
presence. So the mom came to came to the baby immediately when she feels that's the time. Baby knew that they felt safe. Mum was close. Yeah.
Yeah. You could really see that this was something that baby knew as soon as mum was there. Yes, I'm safe. And it's so dramatic to see them regulating, and you can see that breath and their eyes closing, and it's a very obvious in what's physically going on for baby that they feel safe, and that emotional change. I first used this clip when I was pregnant with my second baby, when I was doing having a similar session with policymakers, and then I tried it out with baby number two, and it did not work whatsoever at all. So what's interesting about this clip is that mom knows that baby enjoys this and likes this, so that you get that sense of this works for their relationship, right? And there'll be other things that work for other little ones, but there is something probably almost universal about that physical touch as a kind of strategy for regulation. So we'll just have a look at one more, and then you get the sense that maybe these little ones have experience of mom using a different strategy.
Mommy's frustrated. Mommy's mad.
Mommy's mad?
Mommy's frustrated, yes.
Mommy, take a deep breath.
So maybe that's something that when they've been frustrated or mad, mommy's helped them through by encouraging them to take a deep breath. So all the different ways gives you a sense of the kind of variety of different ways that caregivers, different strategies that caregivers use, some really unconsciously to support that emotional regulation, and some more consciously, I care. So we within Petal, we see early childhood as being this really important time for supporting children's well-being, their emotional well-being, and their mental health. And we think about it, this is a toolkit that we collaborated on with UNICEF for understanding and supporting infant and early mental health in kind of local systems. It's a local toolkit. And we wanted to think about, well, how were we thinking about mental health? And we came up with this, drawing on the ideas of others, of thinking about it in terms of what's going on right now for baby and little one in terms of being mentally healthy is about the being, and also the becoming, and how that supports children's mental health in the longer term. But kind of really giving primacy to, it matters how children and babies are right now and how they deserve support right now, because early childhood and infancy is an important part of all of our lives, and kind of matters in the here and now. And where things might be going wrong or children might be experiencing difficulties, they're also candidates for support right from the start of life. And it's not always about thinking about how the early years kind of set us up for more important things that happen later. Why do we think it matters so much? Well, because we have, without being kind of hyperbolic, I think we do probably have a bit of a mental health crisis on our hands for children and young people. This is data from England, from a survey in 2023, where 1 in 5 children and young people, now this was from 8 to 25, so older than the early years, had a probable mental health disorder from a kind of representative survey that they did. And my little beehive diagram there has 6 little segments to it, and that's because it used to be 1 in 6, and before that it used to be 1 in 8, going back to 2017. So there's something is changing in terms of what childhood looks like for children and young people, in terms of the demands and how that's showing up for their mental health. And we also know that problems can and do emerge early. This is a really old graph, but the reason I use it is, so don't worry too much about the percentages because they'll have changed. But the reason I use it is in the darker blue color, you see the rates of mental health problems for children 2 to 5. And in the lighter color, you see them for children who are 8 to 17. And the main takeaway from this is that they're not that different. So it's not that mental health isn't something that exists for babies and young children. It's something that we have all our lives, right from right from birth onwards. And things can be challenging for younger children, and warrant support in the early years as well. And that requires a whole system approach. So we're back to thinking about context again. In order to support children to be, babies and children to be mentally healthy, we need to be thinking about what that support looks like across the whole system. And I'm going to talk about 2 programs that are focused on the caregiver relationship. But just to reiterate that point, that to do this well, we need to be both supporting families, but also doing this within systems that are reducing pressures on families and breaking down the societal determinants of mental health as well. So in terms of discrimination, poverty, and all of those other things that happen to families that affect what they can bring to the relationship, and making it more equitable that we can have mentally healthy families and mentally healthy little ones as well. This is not the best diagram. I need to work on my PowerPoint art, but basically to illustrate that there's a whole spectrum of support for children and families in terms of where mental health support might show up. That could be in promotion, so in terms of public health campaigns around the importance of the caregiver relationship. It could be in universal prevention through health visiting services, early childhood care and education, the work of Home Start, particularly where that might be targeted towards families who might need some more support as well, or who might be looking for support, or through Family Nurse Partnership, those sorts of programs which are really making themselves available to families who might be facing more adversity. We then have something that we call indicated prevention, which is really where we might be getting an early signal that there might be a mental health need, where children might be at greater risk. And then treatment, where we know that there's something that might benefit from support, either from a parent-infant relationship team, it might be from a CAM, so child and adolescent mental health team, where a family might benefit from really kind of a dedicated piece of work or package of care from a specialist service.
Christine,
So in terms,
sorry,
yes, yeah,
can I just quickly jump in because there are 2 questions.
yeah, please do.
Around the New Love Delgado research, so I
Yeah.
thought my best to ask now. So one question is about what ages it's that research cover?
Yeah. So this, for the 1 in 5, that's children aged 8 to 25. So it's older children. And then different previous waves of the survey, they use different age groups. So I think in 2017 it was 1 in 8, and that was 5 to 17-year-olds. So they're not completely comparable, but we are seeing an increase. They have also done some what they call kind of exploratory work with younger children, where they didn't see the rates as being as high as I've shown them here, which is about kind of 10% maybe of younger children experiencing a mental health difficulty. I think it's actually higher here, it's 15%, but in other research studies that I've seen, it kind of comes out at about 10%. We didn't find that in the New Love study, in the New Love and Delgado study. It was a lower rate for younger children, but one of the things that they said is that they didn't have very good measures to pick up on what might be going on for younger children. So it's really hard to tell what the rates might be. But you'll know from your work and with colleagues that you might work with a lot in parent-infant relationship teams or in child and adolescent mental health teams, that there is a need for younger children. We don't want to overestimate that. Of course, we need to be very careful, but that these things can and do show up in early childhood. Does that help answer the question, Vicky, about about the age
Yeah,
range.
it does. I think that's also another data kind of released recently around child in need or children in need from England. I think it's very similar. It's highlighted
Yes.
the mental health needs from the early age as well. So that's
Yes.
kind of like comparable. And the other
Yes.
question is about it's from Prue. She's asking like how do we know how this data compare to data from other countries? So it's like outside England, for example.
Um, I don't have the comparable data to hand, but there does seem to be an increase generally in this age group. So in this kind of older middle childhood age group in other contexts as well. There seemed to be a little bit of a peak, maybe linked to the pandemic, and then it kind of stabilized a bit. Um, so it's we'd need kind of more up-to-date data to see if it's continuing to stabilize or is it increasing again. With younger children, when I look across, so this is old data, but I am familiar with data from other countries in the younger age range, right from kind of 1 upwards. And it seems to be around 10% that we see of young children in the 0 to 5 age range with what we would say is a clinically significant mental health difficulty. So where it's affecting their functioning. And so that could be what we say is externalizing behavior. So maybe challenging behavior where they're really struggling to manage their emotions and behavioral tantrums, aggression, those sorts of things. Or it could be anxiety as well. Or more internalizing kind of low mood, those sorts of things. And it is strange to use this language with younger children, but these things can happen and warrant support when they do. So around 10% of children in a variety of different contexts. Different countries have different quality of data, but that tends to be what we see.
Thank you, Christine.
Did that help?
Yeah.
So that brings us on to, I'm going to talk now a little bit about the different studies that we have in PEDAL. I'm just going to talk about 2 of these. So you should be able to see these kind of 3 bubbles. I'm going to talk about the first one is the Healthy Start, Happy Start, which is looking at 1 and 2 year olds and providing them with support early on and what happens. Is that effective and helpful? And the other one is looking at widening access to early language support through the caregiver relationship. Oh, am I going the right way? Yeah. Okay. So in the Healthy Start, Happy Start study, we wanted to test the clinical and cost effectiveness of providing brief early support to parents designed to prevent enduring behavior problems for 1 to 3 year olds. So thinking about 12 to 36 months, so 1 and 2 year olds. So when children were really young. We used a program called VIP. I'm not sure if people have heard of it before. It's video feedback intervention to promote positive parenting. How that program works is it's got 6 sessions delivered every 2 weeks. And it's based on attachment theory, which we spoke about before and will be familiar to you, and also social learning theory, which is really thinking about how caregivers respond to more challenging behavior and how those responses might shape whether children are likely to engage in those behaviors again. So thinking about techniques and strategies for more difficult moments as well as really warm and responsive caregiving that is associated with attachment theory. In our study, it was delivered predominantly through health visiting services, but this is a parenting program or intervention that can be delivered through lots of different workforces. But we were particularly interested in health visiting. And each visit has 2 parts to it. So in the first part of the visit, the facilitator or practitioner, or health visitor in this case, films the parent and the caregiver and the little one doing everyday things, mostly playing, but also, like we saw in that don't touch activity, more challenging things as well. Maybe reading a book together, maybe having a meal together, those sorts of things. And in the second half of the visit, they look at a clip from the previous visit and they explore it together. And this is the kind of main part of the program. And they're really focusing, the facilitator is trying to bring the caregiver's attention to positive moments of interaction. So when things are going well, it's very strength-based. And we'll talk a little bit more about the kinds of things that they encourage the caregiver to notice. The reason we chose VIP is that it had already been shown in lots of other studies with families from different kinds of backgrounds and groups to be effective in promoting sensitivity. So in that kind of sensitive caregiving. So that red line shows you, it gives you a sense of the effect size or how effective it is for sensitivity. And those different bars represent different groups that the program has been tested with. So you can see it's been tested with families who are maybe showing lower sensitivity in their caregiving, also families where the caregiver might be experiencing a mental health issue, where the family might be experiencing poverty, also where the child might have a sibling with autism, which can make kind of understanding cues and signals a little bit more challenging, and can benefit from having video feedback to help the parent kind of explore that. So in different groups, basically, this program has been shown to be a helpful way of promoting caregiving. And how it works is its target is really that sensitive parenting or sensitive caregiving. And it does it in a number of different ways. So earlier we saw somebody in the chat use that speaking for the child technique. So somebody did a really lovely job of describing what was going on for little one in that first video by putting it into their words. So that's something that the facilitators might use in this program. They might stop the video clip and use the child's voice to say what's going on in a moment. And that could be something like, oh, I loved it when you played with me just there, Mum, or something like that. Or it could be to promote empathy. It could be, oh, I'm finding this really tough, if it's in a more challenging moment. Helping the caregiver to orientate themselves to the child's perspective, which builds empathy and also promotes kind of sensitive or responsive caregiving. There's also a technique that we use with the video where we might stop it, see what's going on for the child, stop it again when the parent responds to that, and then stop it again to show how that showed up in the response for the child. So that could be something really simple. It could be that the child is reaching for the next block. The parent helps them by giving the block. And they then look back to the parent with this big kind of beaming smile because they were able to build the tower for the first time. Or it could be in a more challenging moment to show how the caregiver was supporting the child. And the reason we do that, we call it a sensitivity chain, is to show basically that the caregiver is making the difference in these really little moments that might just pass by if you didn't have the video to stop it, to show, look, you really are making a difference, whether it's a moment of kind of beautiful connection or supporting them in kind of a more challenging moment. We also stop it when the child is looking for the caregiver. And that might be because they want them to join them in play, or it might be because they've got stuck on something or they're upset. And we call those attachment behaviors. And that can be quite powerful because it shows the caregiver how important they are to the child. And they happen all the time, every day. So the caregiver might not notice them, but when you see them in the video, they can be quite powerful as well. And we also stop them on more difficult moments and explore what's going on to build the caregiver's reflective functioning, to really connect what's going on internally for the child with their behavior. And that can be quite helpful and powerful where behavior might be more challenging, because it can help the caregiver to understand why that's happening for the child, basically. So we tested this program in a number of different sites. In England, we firstly screened over 2,000 children using a questionnaire to see if they were kind of having the types of behaviours that might suggest that they were struggling with their behaviours, like more temper tantrums or aggression or those sorts of things. That's not at all a diagnostic way of saying, yes, there's definitely a problem, just something that suggests that they might benefit from having the program. And then we had 300 families split up into two groups. Half of them had the program, the VIP program, and half of them continued as normal. We went back after 5 months, after the families who were randomly allocated to the program had finished that. 2 years later, and then it says 6 years, it was actually closer to 7 years later. So when those 1 and 2 year olds were then 7 to 9. So this slide is some of the results from the study. So one of the things that we did each time we went and visited the family was we did an interview about child behaviour. So asked how the child was getting on in a range of kind of everyday moments that looked at different kind of aspects of their behaviour. And we found that there was a benefit to the families who had received the program immediately after, but also 2 years later. It was a small benefit, but it was a change, for example, from if you were thinking about kind of having temper tantrums, it was a change from having temper tantrums every day to once or twice a week. Or a change from the severity of them in terms of maybe breaking things to them being more mild, so maybe shouting. So we would think that even though that's a small change, it could be quite a meaningful change for children and families. We then went back, as I said, 7 years later, and we found that there was still a small sustained effect for children at that time, which really surprised us because this is a very brief program, 6 sessions, delivered when they were 1 and 2. They're now 7, 8, and 9. And we're still seeing this kind of enduring benefit, even though it's small, that their families had this parenting support early on. So there was a lot of things about the study that gives us confidence in the findings. One of the most important things is we tested it with real practitioners doing the real messy, hard work that you and your services are doing on the ground. It's all well and good testing these things in nice research studies where you can send a research team out to deliver a program. It's very different when you're juggling a busy service and you're getting your team to deliver something like this. So if you see it working in those contexts, you can be fairly confident that it's a real effect, and families engaged well with it, and the teams who were delivering it were able to do that to a high quality. So that gives us confidence that this is what we would call actionable evidence. So the take-home message is that there's a high probability that the program was helpful in reducing behavior even up to 6 and 7 years later. We now have this well-designed research evidence in the UK that shows that early home-based intervention can work now and in the longer term. This is something that you will know from your practice already, but we haven't actually had very good data in the UK to show that it's the case. We've been drawing a lot on data from the US, and we haven't always seen it in our studies in the UK. So we think this study is important because it shows how important that early preventative, supportive, family-based, relational-based interventions can be, like the work that you and your teams are doing on the ground. So I just wanted to take a moment for us to have some breakout space. I've been talking for a long time. Thank you for listening to me. Just to reflect on how this is resonating with the work that you and your teams are doing. So are there things that help that you think help caregivers to take the baby's child's perspective? And what helps caregivers to notice moments of connection or times that things are going well? Is there anything that you're doing in your practice that you think helps the caregiver connect with what's going on for little one, and also noticing how important it is what they're doing and how much of a benefit that's having for the child? So we'll take some time in breakout rooms to chat on this for a little while. I wondered if anyone wanted to share what came up in their group, either in relation to the questions or beyond that. Sometimes the most interesting discussions is when you go off topic a little bit.
We had some very useful examples of how local home starts were using groups in terms of other parents almost being the models for, and also reflecting and mirroring good practice. It was really interesting to hear it.
Really, thank you for sharing that, Prue. One of the nice things about the video feedback is the parent becomes their own model. So it's hard to argue when you can see yourself doing the good practice. And similarly, when it sounds like you're saying, Prue, about other parents kind of sharing their good practice so that parents can kind of learn from others as models. Is that what you were describing, Prue?
Yes, it was the fact that other parents were commenting on it as well. So it wasn't just the group leader or whoever it was, but also you had an opportunity to see what other parents were doing, because if you don't know what to do, or you're not sure of it, somebody saying, oh, look, she's or he's doing that and the baby's doing this, then actually it gives you examples to store away and try yourself.
Yeah, it really demystifies it, doesn't it? Makes it a bit more concrete and accessible. We'll use that a little bit in the next program that I'm just going to briefly talk about. We show clips of other families doing it, some of which have been through the program, and then we also use video feedback. Was there anything else from any of the other groups or any other observations?
We kind of discussed around informing the parents as well and raising that awareness that they have a responsibility in their children's emotions as and role modeling that and the empathy towards that and showing the families as well sometimes that it's not just them big moments. You don't need a really orchestrated playtime. It's just in them little moments that can really get a lot from as well, so that the conversations they're having from newborn, that they're as important as, because you hear a lot, they don't understand what I'm saying or they don't talk back to me, but and telling them about the cues, that's how a baby's communicating back with you. Or like in that first video where the mum just like with the baby, that's a communication, it's a soothing. They've soothed each other in a sense. So and just really raising that awareness, because sometimes it's not that the families, it's just that they don't know. we can go in and we know, we get trained on it quite highly, and we go in and we just kind of, sometimes it's that expectation, like they just don't know of what to look out for and what to do.
It's really powerful when you can connect that to those little everyday moments. And I feel like you've given it the best setup for the next video that we're going to look at. So we can all think of your description there. Any other comments or reflections? Was there a third group?
We talked in our group about affirming to parents that it is a learning process. And that there's not like two sets of parents, like parents who know automatically what their baby's trying to tell them and a group that doesn't, that it's an everyday, as one of the other lady said, in the small moments of reading baby's cues and trial and error, and incorporating that, especially in the group setting, then as you said, demystifying it amongst like peers, and then like in your role as group leader, sort of affirming that again for parents, and that it's a process of getting to know your baby, an infant and child, and that's help them to notice those moments of connection in the everyday, and confirming that that's that's what it is, that they're doing it, pointing out the positives.
Absolutely. And how almost the best tool is curiosity. That we can't absolutely know what's going on for baby or little one. And so just being curious about it is a great way in. As you were talking there, Maeve, that really brought that kind of importance of curiosity to my mind. And also that it's going to go wrong. Like we're going to get it wrong all the time, every day. And that's part of
and 45 years later, it's still learning.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to put that in.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you did. And that healthy relationships are, we call it rupture and repair, which is just one way of describing it, right? Like that what makes a healthy relationship is the coming back and trying again, not the avoidance of trying for it not to go right wrong in the first place. But yeah, keeping that curiosity and optimism going when it gets tough and doesn't go the way we expect. I thought we'd jump in and just look at a couple more examples of where the relationship shows up, particularly around supporting language development. And we do that through something called Playtime at Books. And then we will stop for more discussion and conversation, if that's okay. We won't go into breakout rooms, which is what we'd originally timed. We'll just come back as a group like this. I'll stop sharing and then we can have a bit more of a chat. So I'm going to share again. Can you see this? See the screen?
Yeah, that's fine.
So perfect. So then I just want to quickly touch on how we use a lot of the same strategies in a program called Playtime at Books, which is really around recognizing how powerful language is for the supporting children's outcomes. That when we connect to children's communication and we join the conversation, expand on the conversation, and enrich the home learning environment, how powerful that can be for children's outcomes. So was it Kira was describing about what communication looks like? Because I think we'll just have a look at this little clip, another one from Dan, which is just, it was almost like you were describing this, Kira, when you were talking.
Sounds like you're saying hi.
You're mommy's boy. You're mommy's boy.
Say hi again.
Hi.
Oh, he's really trying.
Another lovely clip, because we talk about the home learning environment. We're particularly interested in book sharing that. We talk about singing, rhymes, going to the library, all the different things that families do. But ultimately, it's the home learning environment is the relationship. It is those small moments and how much baby is learning there about language, about communication. About how enjoyable having conversations can be even before they're talking. Why are we interested in book sharing? Well, there's lots of research evidence to show that encouraging enjoyable habits around sharing books together is a really powerful predictor of children's outcomes. We particularly like it because when we book share rather than book reading, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like, if there's something really joyful about it. And it just seems like this really special way of being able to stimulate connection as well as a love of books and shared learning early on. So I'm hooked on on book sharing. We adapted the program from a face-to-face program that was originally developed in South Africa. and then trialled in Reading in children's centres there. And we adapted it for virtual and online delivery in what we call our Playtime with Books programme. But book sharing, and you may be really familiar with this in your practice and your work, but we see it as different from book reading in that we use a lot of wordless or picture books with very few words. But really what we're meaning is that in book sharing, the adult, and you see this in these kind of 4 different pictures, the adult is really tuning in to what the child or little one is interested in. They're following that interest. So they're not getting distracted by text. They're just following what the child is interested in, building on it in an emotionally supportive, and I would say fun way that involves the child. So it becomes this kind of playful, enjoyable activity. So in our programme, there's a few different elements to it. Families, the way we've been testing it so far is families receive 4 books, which correspond with different books of the weeks. But this could be the books that families get through book gifting and through Bookstart, and through the Book Trust book gifting programme. Or it could be books that they get going to the library or nursery. They have a welcome call from a facilitator. So this could be, we haven't tested this program yet in Homestart, but we have used other peer volunteer services that we've tested it in. We've tested local authorities with different kind of workforces there. So they get a video call from their facilitator explaining what the program is about. And then they get access to 5 online sessions that they can go through in their own time, which shows we use those kind of model clips of like, this is what it looks like when other people are doing this playful book sharing. And kind of tips and strategies and kind of breaking it down and demystifying it. We encourage them to, so in that fourth bubble, we encourage them to book share every day, even if it's just for a minute. So it doesn't have to be that thing where you sit down in this long playtime, which I think was that Maeve you were talking about. It doesn't have to be this big kind of event. It can just be this really small moment in the buggy or sitting before bedtime. Then they get from that facilitator, they get up to 3 video calls where they send a clip of them trying this out and book sharing at home, and they will look at that clip with the facilitator who gives really strength-based positive feedback about how they're using the skills and focusing on moments of connection and when things are joyful and fun. And so that's the program and how. So they get access to books. They can go online and have a look at the skill sessions in their own time, and then they get up to 3 calls with a trained facilitator who's trained to give them video feedback. There's a variety of different skills that I won't go into too much, but that they can that we kind of actively encourage, following the child's lead, building on that, linking it to the here and now. So it could be, oh look, the baby's wearing welly boots. We were out jumping in puddles in your welly boots yesterday. So depending on how old the little one is, we'll do that. And this is some examples of the kind of online content that they can explore in their own time. So in that panel that you see on the right-hand side, that's an example from one of our books of the week. And you can see the red welly boots there. And they can click on different parts of the page, and we'll give them prompts about how they could talk about that bit of it. Because sometimes when you have a book, it can be, oh, what do I do with this? So we really break it down and make it very tangible. And then they get those video checking calls. So it'd be good to maybe stop and have some questions and a chat. So I won't go through all of the kind of the rest of the slides that I was hoping to cover. But I just want to show you some video feedback in action because it applies to what we're talking about in the Healthy Start, Happy Start study and also in our Playtime with Books study.
The cat's thinking about the bird. The bird's thinking about, what's that tiny thing? A snow.
Sorry, just to say, so you can orientate yourself to this clip. On the big screen is the video clip that the parent will have shared with their facilitator. So they've recorded themselves. We usually say stick your phone in your shoe and record yourself of them book sharing with their little one. And then on the right-hand panel, at the top, you can see my colleague Beth, who's had a look at this clip and picked out moments to explore with Mom. And then Mom is underneath Beth, and they're both looking at it on a video call together.
Nose, lots of noses. Where's your nose? Where's Mummy's nose?
I just thought this was such a lovely moment. She was so ready to show you her nose, and then, you know, she wants to touch your nose. I just thought using real life actions can really help to bring book sharing, you know, to life, make it more fun, take it off the pages and bring it into what you guys are doing together. And this will just really help her, you know, to going from the nose in the book to her nose, your nose is just such a simple way for her to learn and understand words. So I just thought it was just so instant for her to be like, and now straight to Mummy. I just thought, oh, this must be clever. Yeah, so clever. It must be something you guys do a lot.
So that's a clip, but hopefully that gives you a taste of what the video feedback looks in action. I'm conscious of time and I want to give us a couple of minutes for any questions. So I'm going to stop sharing. And there's some resources at the end of the slides. So I'll share those with Vicky so that you can see some of the things we have in Peddle that can around doing book sharing or various other things that we can share. But I wanted to give some time for kind of any questions. So please do jump in, or if there's anything in the chat, Vicky, that we haven't covered.
One from earlier on, Christine's about the graph that you showed the 3% object. Just wanted to, so maybe you can help us to understand a bit about what the numbers actually mean on the graph. You've got like a red line.
So that number shows an effect size, which is across all of those different bars were different groups that the VIP program had been tested with. And in each of those studies, there were two groups, one of which received the VIP program and one of which didn't. They just continued as normal. And all of those studies measured the change in parental sensitivity, so parent behavior. And across the studies, the average effect was a difference, an effect size of 0.4, which I appreciate probably sounds a little bit meaningless, but in research, we would get quite excited about that. We would call that a medium effect size. So it's pretty good in terms of increasing the behavior. Previously, when I was looking at the difference in children's behavior in the Happy Start study, we had an effect size of about 0.2, and that was the difference between going from having temper tantrums every day to a couple of times a week. This is a different outcome. This is parenting behavior, but an effect size of 0.4 is a medium difference in those groups. So we would consider that a meaningful change. Yeah, I hope that helps a bit and isn't too mysterious.
So does it mean that because you've got lots of different groups on the graph, so it works better for certain groups and not?
And those studies have found, so it's an average effect, and actually that was 2017. They've since done that again in 2023. They updated it to 25 studies that had tested VIP. So VIP has been now used with kind of women with perinatal mental health difficulties, been used in more groups, and it continues to show a strong group effect in changing. So it's not always the same in each study, but when you look at it across studies, there seems to be something about the program that works for lots of different groups and has a kind of an average effect that we think is meaningful.
Sure. And Claire's got another question. Can we do the video training anywhere? Is it okay for non-clinical professionals to use?
It absolutely. There's no specific background or training that you need to have to do video feedback. And the same is true for the Playtime at Book study. It's currently the only training we're doing at the moment, though, is for people working in perinatal mental health services. But we're hoping to do a piece of work to kind of make the program more flexible for a variety of different services. So hopefully in the future we'll be able to offer that training, and that's a 5-day training course. Playtime with Books study, which again uses the same video feedback, but particularly around playing with books. We are working with sites next year. So if you're interested in taking part in that and in getting trained, do email me, because that's more of a live training opportunity as part of a research study. Yeah.
We'll make sure to share your contact details with.
Yes, I'll put it. Shall I put it in the chat now so that people have got my email?
Yeah. I've also put a link for any feedback. So any other topics you want us to cover in the future, any feedback for this session. I promise it's only like a very short survey, it's 2 minutes, a few questions. If you can do that, that'd be great. Thank you. Any more questions before we close? Good.
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for your time. I hope you found some of that interesting, and I'd love to keep the conversation going, and yeah, hope to be able to connect with you in the future.
I'm sure we'll have more connections with you, Christine and Pedal, going forward. Just want to last mention that next workshop in December will be on the 11th. It's a Thursday. We've got for Baby's Sake to come and talk about domestic abuse, which is a topic that people have been asking for some time. So we've got a question from Prue. Do you encourage use of first language in the book sharing activities? The National Literacy Strategy has dual language materials for parents on the importance of reading together, and also give advice about singing songs together in the language that you know best. We run a baby book club in Oxford and also have Growing Minds project links to the Imagination Library.
So it's very much up to the caregivers what language they want to use, and we celebrate the languages that they're using in the home. That can be a challenge then for facilitators giving the feedback, but it's not necessarily a complete barrier. We're looking at providing the program in Wales and translating everything into Welsh, for example, also using tech can translate the program into a variety of different languages. So encouraging parents to do whatever is joyful and fun for them, and supporting that, and celebrating the languages that they use in the home. And different groups that we work with, so or that we're hoping to work with in the future, also have lots of promotional activities on singing songs that might be culturally relevant to families, or just songs in general. So all of what you've said, Prue, is really relevant to this, and I will check out the Growing Minds Baby Book Club.
Christine, do you know anywhere else that does the video training? That's a question from Claire.
So the Anna Freud have offered some training. The Pedal is one of the UK training centres for VIP. Anna Freud also offer some training, and then periodically sometimes there'll be some online training. But if you email me and express interest, I'll pass it on to my colleague Eloise, who runs all of our kind of practitioner development, and can connect you with the kind of other training centres for the VIP work as well.
That's great, thank you.
Thanks so much, it's been brilliant.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much, that was really informative.
It was amazing, thank you.